If there was something wrong or something, I didn't know if connect right or something.
Sounded like your phone.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's Kyle down there.
You see, he has that suave voice answering him. That's it.
He was asking Siri to tell him about himself.
He talks to Siri he was in my office earlier talking to Siri.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I hardly ever use that. I'm
I
terrible.
can't stand it. It makes me nuts.
I always feel like when you need to know something right down. What is it?
Oh, nice.
Okay, stand by.
Finance City Council for February 22nd, 2021 is now in session. Roll call, please.
Council President, Mr. Arcaro,
Present?
Mr. Emery,
Here.
Mr. Gah,
Here.
Mr. Kozeski,
Here.
Mrs. Ledford,
Here.
Mrs. McVoy,
She's
not
not
on
here.
yet. Mr. Moiseo,
Here.
City Manager, Mr. Hockaday,
Here.
Finance Director, Mr. Williams,
Here.
Law Director, Mr. Smith.
Here.
Okay, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll move on to approval of the meeting minutes for February 8th, 2021. Are there any alterations or corrections? If not, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Arcaro.
Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozeski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, the meeting minutes for February 8th, 2021 have been approved. We have a number of presentations this evening, and we will begin with an awards presentation to Stephen Menpa, our Employee of the Month. Mrs. McConnell, if you would read the certificate into the record, please.
Certificate of Achievement Employee of the Month. The employee for the month of February is Steve Mempa. Steve Mempa was hired as an operator in June 2014 in the Water Department. During his time with the Water Department, he has worked different shifts and is currently the fill-in operator, in which he has his own day shift position. But when other operators are off, it is his job to fill in their position on other shifts until they return. Steve does not shy away from responsibility when the job requires stepping into a role that most operators prefer not to do. A critical part of the operations at the water plant is working in the lab, testing the water quality. Operators working in the lab at the water plant are EPA certified as operational lab analysts. Steve has taken on the extra responsibility of full certification of microbiological and chemical testing. This requires mixing of all lab standards used in day-to-day operations, quality control checks on all equipment, and running microbiological testing to ensure contaminants are not present in the water system. Steve did not hesitate when asked if he would be willing to take over as the lab supervisor when the position became available. The willingness of Steve to take on these different positions helps keep the water system running at a high standard while supplying quality water to our consumers. Steve's dedication as an operator, along with his work in the lab, will ensure quality water for the city's water customers. Signed, John J. Arcaro, Council President, and Terry Moiseo, Junior Council Member, dated this day of February.
Hey, congratulations to Steve. He's not able to join us this evening as he's working second shift. So. Okay, our next presentation will be a proclamation for the American Legion. And with us tonight in council chambers is Larry Latva. Larry, if you'd like to come forward. Right here? Yep. That'd be great. Okay, Ms. Khan, if you would read the proclamation with record.
Proclamation from the office of the Conneaut City Council. A proclamation honoring the 100th anniversary of the American Legion Cal Post 151, Wayland W. Cal, Harland W. Cal, and generations of Conneaut men and women who served their country and often sacrificed their lives for our freedom. Whereas Wayland W. Cal and Harlan W. Cal were twin brothers who resided in Conneaut, Ohio, and served their country during World War I. Whereas Wayland W. Cal and Harlan H. Cal enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1917 and became part of the American Expeditionary Force in France. Whereas Wayland W. Cal rose to the rank of second lieutenant in the 513 Engineers of the AEF and fought in the war from April 29, 1918 to June 25, 1918, dying from tuberculosis on October 12, 1919, most likely from injuries received during the war. Whereas Harlan H. Cal became a pilot in France and rose to the rank of first lieutenant and served in the 90th Aero Squad and was killed in action on October 18, 1918. Whereas American Legion Cal Post 151 was created in 1919 and named in honor of Wayland W. Cal and Harlan H. Cal for their duty to their country, and Hugh W. Marcy served as its first commander. Whereas American Legion Cal Post 151 has served returning veterans in the Conneaut community for more than 100 years, keeping the flames of freedom and the memory of those who fought for it brightly burning on even the darkest nights. Now, therefore, on behalf of a grateful community, the Council of the City of Conneaut congratulates American Legion Cal Post 151 for serving veterans in our community for more than 100 years and honors the service and memory of Wayland W. Cal and Harlan H. Cal and the men and women of Conneaut and across the United States who served their country, protected our freedom, and often sacrificed their lives willingly for a cause and higher purpose greater than themselves. And witness whereof John J. Arcaro, City of Conneaut, President of Council, hereunto set my hand and cause the official seal of Conneaut to be affixed this 22nd day of February 2021.
Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate it very much. We're a proud member of our community and will be a fortnight for our establishment to ever go away, as long as we can get more young men and women to come in and join our organization. And again, we thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Congratulations, and we appreciate all you do for the community.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Congratulations, and thank you for all you do for our community.
Our next presentation is a proclamation for Ron Ross, who recently passed away. Ms. O'Connell, if you could read the proclamation to the record, please.
A proclamation from the office of the city council. Whereas Anthony Ron Ross was born and raised in the city of Conneaut. Whereas Ron chose to call our lakeside town his home, married Arlene, the love of his life, for more than 55 years, raised a family of his own, and opened a legendary business known as Ron's Meat Market, which served this community for nearly 50 years. Whereas Ron was a dedicated public servant, having served the city as a Fourth Ward councilman from January 1977 to March 1979, as a sanitarian for the Conneaut Health Department from April 1979 to November 1987, and as an inspector for the State of Ohio Department of Agriculture. Whereas Ron always put people before business, generous with his time, and always made time to enjoy a good conversation with anyone that wanted to talk. Whereas Ron was a civic-minded citizen who helped his community through involvement with his church, the Corpus Christi Parish, the Moose Lodge, Teen Town, JC's, and the Knights of Columbus. Whereas Ron passed away on January 24, 2021, and will always be remembered for his infamous sausage and peppers and continuous love and support of the Conneaut community. Now, therefore, the Council of the City of Conneaut does hereby express the deepest appreciation and gratitude to Ron Ross for his dedicated service to the City of Conneaut and our community, and further extends its condolences to Ron's family. Witness whereof John J. Arcaro, City of Council President of Council, hereunto set my hand and cause the official seal of Conneaut to be affixed this 22nd day of February 2021.
Okay, thank you. Says the proclamation states Ron will be very sadly missed by the community. Okay, that concludes our presentations this evening. We'll move on to citizen comments. Anybody have any citizen comments? Okay, hearing none, move on to communications.
I have none this evening.
Does council have any communications? Terry, you want to do this one?
Oh, yeah. We did receive a thank you. I'll read it. Dear City Council members, thank you all for having me and my family. And also a big thank you for the coupon for the rainbows. I haven't got to use it yet, but I will use it. Thank you, Destiny Sharp. And you deserve a great big thank you. So that was from Destiny thanking City Council for her Student of the Month.
Okay, and I also did receive an email from Jack Burfield. You recall that we gave Mary Burfield a proclamation on her 100th birthday. And he states, thank you for generating the proclamation, taking time to read it, and forwarding us a copy. My mother will be elated to receive it. While she's in Florida, her heart will always be in Conneaut. On her behalf, we send best wishes for continued growth and success. Best regards, Jack and Gloria Burfield. So that's all the communications for this evening. We'll move on to reports of our administration, beginning with City Manager, Mr. Hockaday.
Thank you, Council President Arcaro. Have just a couple updates for you this evening. Just a reminder, there is a Planning Commission meeting tomorrow night here in person, or there's also a Zoom link for those that want to join remotely. And there's going to be some discussion of the B&B ordinance and some other items. So I'll leave that open in case Councilwoman Tammy Ledford wanted to add anything additional to that. So just a quick meeting reminder there. I'm going to jump down to COVID vaccines just because we continue to get an overwhelming number of people that are registering online. I would remind everybody that our primary goal is to serve the area of Conneaut, Ohio. We continue to receive a number of registrations, not only from people within Ashtabula County, but across the state of Ohio and even outside of the state of Ohio. I think we had a guy from Kentucky trying to register with us today. Nichelle has done a great job in trying to respond to those people that we probably cannot serve, and giving them some alternatives there. Our cases overall continue to decline. We are actively monitoring 17 cases. As of today, that's down from about 45 cases two weeks ago. So that is a very promising decline. Overall vaccine distributions to date, not people, but actual vaccine distributions is about 1,700. Our supply remains very limited. The last couple of weeks, though requesting 600 doses, we've received only 100 doses. I know there are several supply chain levels at the state level and above in terms of some issues. I know the weather over the last several weeks has not been amenable to some of their logistics supply chain issues. We're hoping that we may receive about another 600 doses here in the next week or two, but that's not guaranteed. We have been guaranteed 100 for this week. So I just want to give folks an idea of what the waiting list looks like. As of today, there are over 400 people still in the 70+ category that are registered pending an appointment. And there are 965+ that are registered pending an appointment. The only item that is pending on that is whenever we receive enough vaccine to schedule that appointment. So to an extent is out of our hands. It's in the governor's and federal government's hands in terms of correcting the supply chain shortages and making sure they're coming to us. It's not just Conneaut or the city of Conneaut. This is a problem county, statewide, nationally. There are a lot of people in line to receive this. So please, again, I would urge you to be patient. They will get to you. So I think Nichelle and her team has done a good job getting it out the door. And I assume as soon as we receive some more vaccines, she will continue to do that. Just a quick reminder, there are 2 ways to register. You can go to conneautohio.gov and follow the link on the front page to do that registration online, or you can call it 440-593-3087. So those are the 2 ways. All vaccines are currently being given at Fire Station 3. That's 392 Middle Road on the east side, right off Route 20. So that's all I'll say on that, unless there are any questions regarding that. Not hearing anything, so I'm going to go on with the rest of my report. We did have our Ohio EPA wastewater treatment plant, no feasible alternatives. That's the NFA plan. And we submitted this plan over a year ago, and we have been waiting on the Ohio EPA. They're supposed to come out and do a site visit and sit down with us. It was submitted right before the pandemic last spring. We still have not had an opportunity to do a site visit with the Ohio EPA, as they are not doing field work. So we did have that discussion. Largely, they are accepting the conclusions of our NFA analysis as well as our recommendation. Part of that recommendation, it's been such a long time, I'll just refresh everybody's collective memories, is to add a 3rd clarifier at the wastewater treatment plant. That will allow us in periods of high flow to achieve more effective filtration and achieve new or higher levels of NPDES permit regulations, which obviously they constrain, how much total suspended solids and other treatment level effects during storm flows. And essentially what that NFA analysis does in our case, while we have an I&I issue, an inflow and infiltration issue, which is cross connections, gutters, footer drains, and other things tied into the sanitary system illegally, it is not so terrible that we can't solve it with additional treatment solution. So our recommendation is that at some point we build that 3rd clarifier in order to achieve those forthcoming permitted standards that are going to come out in future NPDES permits issued to the city by the Ohio EPA. So it doesn't mean we have to build it next week. Those standards are well down the road. But that is our recommendation, and they're accepting that report. It does not mean that we don't try and solve I&I. We have done a number of things to improve our treatment process at the wastewater treatment plant. If you recall, last year, we contracted with a company called C&K to clean the interceptor line. We've had some SSO issues in other areas, which is sanitary sewer overflows. We've even purchased a house and demoed a house that was very near one of our areas of consistent SSOs, which have all but disappeared after cleaning that line. That has helped a great deal. The other thing that helped a great deal was the construction of the Headworks facility. That removed kind of a log jam in our system where it more freely flows continuously in high flow situations, and has reduced bypassing and other issues that we've had in the past in our system. So we kind of attack both ends. Brian has put together an aggressive sanitary sewer lining project where we've done significant lining in the last several years. So the answer is both. But we'll continue to do stuff out in the system. But ultimately, in order to meet permitted standards, we will look at that third clarifier as an option. That third clarifier would go in the exact footprint of where the former windmill was. And that was one of the chief issues with the windmill and its future was where we would locate a third clarifier in the event that we have to move in that direction. So I just want to bring that to council's attention in terms of something that will be part of a future discussion, either later this year or even next year. The other major thing that I wanted to bring to council's attention is obviously we just came off a week of almost 2 weeks of pretty extreme cold. One of the things that was bad about the cold we had, and obviously it's hard to complain when you see what's going on in Texas, but we had very little snow cover during a long period of that prolonged cold. It's very tough on our water lines and anything in the ground, even though we bury them a lot deeper than they do in Texas. We have had numerous breaks, 3 on Lake Road, 2 on Old Main, 1 on Detroit, Point Drive, Mill Street, Walnut, and Whitney. We had 3 breaks just over the weekend alone. So a couple of things that I want to bring to everybody's attention about that is it's not a crisis at this moment in terms of any of their budgetary needs, but later on in the year, it may require, maybe even in late next fall, this coming fall, that we have to take a look at some of those appropriation lines for the water distribution department to replenish some of their stocks. Things like clamps, couplers, other fittings are starting to get in short supply. We have ordered and reordered some of the stock to fix some of this. However, many of these parts are on back order. As you imagine, nationally, there's a lot of demand for couplers and clamps right now. So it's not a crisis. We have plenty of stuff on the shelf. But if we have continued weeks like this, then we could have some issues. Now, typically, anytime there's a crisis or shortage of supplies, we do turn to our neighbors as they turn to us. And we always make sure that we can assist any other adjacent systems as they assist us when we're in need as well. So I think we're in good shape. My point in saying that is if we have continued problems where we're having, half a dozen to a dozen breaks in a week, then we might have some supply issues with clamps and couplers. And also we'll have to look at overtime materials and supplies and some of those water distribution lines. So just note that. I'm not asking anybody to take any action just yet. So those are the major things, except for Mr. Gaw. I wanted to remind you about selecting a date for a recreation and parks meeting for first or second week in March, if we could. That's all I have, unless there are any other questions.
Any questions for the city manager? Okay, I just have one comment. Had my elderly mother and mother-in-law over at the fire station today for their second round of the vaccine, and everything went smooth in and out in less than a half hour. And I did speak with the health commissioner, who indicated that hopefully she will have an update on the vaccines distribution when in the next day or so, and she would get in touch with you.
I did forget one other thing. We do have a new online system where you can report things such as potholes on streets or other things. We did have a gentleman call today and say hit one out on Route 20. They went out and fixed it today and patched it today. So I would encourage people, whether they contact members of council or whether you can encourage them to do it directly. The way I like to do this is, if you call our office, we're going to type it into that online system. So if you know they relate to you and you relate to me, it still goes into the online system, and that way there's a tracking. I would encourage residents, if you do see something, and it doesn't have to be, you know, a pothole. It could be a street light. It could be any improper condition. You can go right in there. There's a whole slew of choices that you can use there, or describe your own. And what's nice is it creates a nice little email chain of when we got the issue. And if you put your email address in there, it will respond to you when that issue has been corrected. So, you know, I would encourage all residents, as we embark upon pothole season here, if they see something, go ahead and report it. You know, certainly we don't want anything to cause any damage to anybody's car, but this time of season when we're in the freeze thaw, they just kind of show up overnight. So just please report them as you see them. Help us be partners in keeping the roads nice.
And that is right on the front page of the website, and it is monitored daily.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right, if there's no questions for the city manager, we'll move on to the finance director, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Arcaro. I don't necessarily have a report, but I do have a revised amortization schedule for council to review. I'd given you several options the last time. One was a 15-year term, a 10-year term. One was through SIB. It was a 3%. Council ended up deciding to go with the lower rate and the 10-year term. This is actually an 11-year. It's 2.2%. And it is a little bit different than the amortization schedule I gave you last week for the same amount of time. This one has a little bit additional principal payment in the first year, an additional $2,000, and then it goes $43,000 in principal for the first year. The second year it's back down to 41, and then it increases by $1,000 each year. By doing it that way, it saves us about $3,000 additional dollars in interest. The SIB loan would have been 3% at 10 years. And that was this is about a $25,000 savings in interest by going this route. The payments will be about $51,000 per year. Total interest paid over that 11-year period will be $65,239. So the termination date on this is 12/1/2031. The only other thing I wanted to add, we did ask them about a possible extension. They did extend it to our first payment until December 2021. Had we not done that and delayed it for another year, it just would have meant more accrued interest. So I thought it was better to make the payment this year, but we will have to amend the appropriation in the Public Works budget in order to accommodate this payment. So we'll do that later on in the year, but I want to let you know that up front. So, okay. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for the finance director? No, move on to the law director, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. First, I just wanted to express my appreciation for doing a resolution for the American Legion. I've driven past that building for 30 some odd years, and I know it's the cold building, but I didn't know the history of it, and I didn't know the people that were part of it. And the people that are named after them, Harland and Wayland, Cole were both from, I think they were born in Lake County, and they moved to Conneaut at some point. And as you heard there, they were killed, or one was killed in action and the other died, I think, from his wounds. But it's interesting to go and Google their names, which is what I did, because they have photographs on site. And it's really kind of an impressive thing. We don't really have any more World War I veterans around. The World War II veterans are getting pretty scarce. Even the people in my age group that served in Vietnam are getting gray-haired and older too. So I think there's a lot of history there, and I think it behooves all of us to try to learn more about that history. It's my understanding that you don't have to be a veteran to join the American Legion. They have provisions for sons or daughters of the Legion. So if your mother or father was in the service, you may be able to join. But it's a worthwhile organization, and it supports the veterans, and there's just a lot of history that's unique to Conneaut that is there. I've been spending a lot of time here lately on planning and zoning issues as they affect interest in trying to get an economic development. And it's becoming clear to me again that sometimes our zoning code is probably one of the things that holds us back a little bit sometimes. And the last time it was really revamped was probably 40 years ago when it was written. And Conneaut's not like it was 40 years ago. And I think council and I think the planning commission need to take time, and take a lot of time, to start going through some of these zoning districts and what's available and how it works, whether the permitted uses and the conditional uses are what you want it to be, and how in fact you can streamline this so that people don't have to go through a lot of administrative appeals or red tape in order to try to bring a new business or something into town. I know there's a lot of talk about regulating chickens and bed and breakfasts, and that's important stuff, and I don't want to discourage that, but there's some issues that are beginning to press themselves, I think, on your existing zoning code. It kind of reminds me a couple of years ago when the O'Reillys came through, and we went to court on that and we lost the first time. And then we spent a year and a half going back over the zoning code and making changes, much needed changes to the code that needed being done. And so I would urge council and the planning commission to look at this stuff and see what we can do to expedite or streamline, because we can only pound square pegs into round holes for so long. We did an administrative search warrant last week for a Harbor Street home that's in pretty bad shape, where it's just, we had the health department there, we had the code enforcement people there, and we had the building department from the county. And we're just waiting for the building department at this point to come up, excuse me, with an opinion as to the stability of the house and whether something else needs to happen. I would also remind you that we're still needing funding to demolish 3 commercial buildings that were condemned probably 3 years ago through our court action. And I know money's tight, but if you just keep that in mind, and if something comes up or if there's something to develop, that would, if something develops, that some funds would be available. Probably the most important one is the one in Farnham School, which is open, it's unrestricted, and it's dangerous. I've been doing a fair amount of work involving the East Side Industrial Park. Excuse me a minute. And as you may know, there's a mortgage on it held by the state of Ohio, approximately $180,000. I think we pay $5,000 a month, if I'm correct. On that, there's growing interest from some people as to wanting to do something there, and we need to be able to work those liens off the property so that the people can take property without, subject to these mortgages. We've also been kind of working with the city manager's office and the CT for reparceling, and I think that's almost completed. In fact, I think I can pick that up tomorrow, Jim. I think it's available in Jefferson.
Jess is picking it up. In the morning.
Okay, good. We've also been conducting an appraisal of the property through a firm in Erie, Pennsylvania, for some of these parcels. So I think there's some activity there. Been working on the lease or the transfer of the gas tap at Truck World. That's the ordinance 8820 that's been on the table for the last couple of months, and hopefully we're beginning to make some progress on that, but there's some issues that have to be overcome. Let's see and we've been also working with the company to remove boat molds and maybe even some barrels of stuff from the old static building. So, but the really interesting point was the stuff with the American Legion and the work they do and the people that have made that up. And there's a lot of stories to tell, and I hope someone does a lot of these people are still alive and with us.
Okay. Yes, thank you for doing that research on the Legion. Sounds like you've been a little busy down there in the law director's office.
It was fun.
Okay.
It was fun.
Any questions for the law director?
Kyle, we don't have a cost on Farnham School, do we?
No.
We never did get a cost, or
About 55,000.
55,000.
That's a couple of years old.
There should be fewer bricks standing.
With that?
Asbestos issues, things like that.
So because of the compromised structural issues with that building, they were able to do some sampling. In other words, they would pull from a single wall and then project to the rest of the building. So we feel pretty good about it. It's just a question of where you get the money from. So if we wanted to do demos around the city, then we could probably blow the entire general revenue fund just on demolitions on buildings that are probably ready to go today. So we've tried to work on some grant funds with those structures, and there's not a lot of people, not a lot of agencies out there that want to commit demolition funds. When we had the NIP program for residential structures, that was wonderful, but that was a settlement from the mortgage crisis brought on by several bad practices from bad banks and mortgaging facilities that was divided up and doled out, and that's essentially expended. So we on occasion receive some CDBG dollars for some demos. Obviously, we did 3 residential demos just recently with some CDBG dollars. So it's very limited. So we have to pick our battles. And, we have 3 structures right now that have orders, court orders, and to be demoed. One on Harbor, one on Mill Street, and one, the one at Farnham. All told, I think if we had to price it out, there's probably about $150,000 in demolition just between those 3 structures that we have existing orders on today. So, it's a what do you want to do with those dollars? And typically when we have to weigh risk and liability, but we also want to weigh, economic opportunity as well. So in the grand scheme of things, it's easy to say, well, we should just knock them all down. Well, yeah, true. But if we spend all that money on that, then when we do have opportunities in the industrial park or whatever. We've expended all our revenue on those things and not on things that actually move Conneaut forward. So it's a little bit of everything is the answer. A little bit of demo, a little bit of economic development. I tend to go towards economic development that gets the taxpayer return on their dollar, is my bend. But we can do whatever you want. It's whatever council desires. It's a tough situation. I wish we had the generous finances of other communities, but we don't. And so we make our choices and we pick our battles. That's where we're at.
Just a footnote, we acquired 2 more houses this past week.
2 additional?
Yes, 2 additional houses that need to be torn down. And I think one of the things we talked about earlier, when this came up 2 or 3 years ago, rather than paying out the full $150,000 in 1 year, or whatever the cost would be, try to do 1 a year even, or maybe even 1 every 2 years. But it just get the can moving.
I'm sure we have some liability there potentially.
Well, I mean, they're eyesores. They're eyesores.
And these properties are owned by individuals that, and ultimately what Kyle's office did was file a case against them and say, you need to tear this down. They refused to do anything with it. And the court says the city has the right to tear them down and assess those costs back to the property owners. Now, in all 3 of those cases, I can tell you there's virtually 0 chance you will ever recover any of those dollars from the property owners or from the sale of the property, because the city would not be the beneficiary of the sale. That there are other lien holders and creditors that would be well in line in front of us, including state taxing agencies. So we have a very limited chance of recovering any of those funds. You get to eliminate the blight and the liability, and hopefully that's enough. So, but if we had to pick one, I would pick the one on Harbor. Today, I mean, if you asked me to pick one to prioritize, that would be the one I choose, just because of the other economic opportunities in that area.
Yeah, there's 2 of them in the Harbor area, aren't there? Or just the one?
970 Harbor, and then there's 363 Mill.
Okay, all right. It's 970 Harbor, which is right in the area that we're trying to develop.
Sure.
And so I think that would be a great one to start with too.
Mr. Smith, the administrative search warrant that you served, was that an occupied structure?
Yes.
Are you able to share the location?
I know it's on Harbor Street. I'm not sure about the number. So I probably shouldn't go that far on it, but it's something where there was a lot of garbage. There may have been a question as to whether or not there was running water. And when we find these, we try to move on them.
Okay. All righty. Any other questions for the law director?
Kyle, the planning commission changed their meetings to work with you for that reason, to update the codes,
Good.
correct?
Well, yes, I'm planning on being there tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, Kyle.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions for the law director? If not, we'll move on to reports of our committees. Does anybody have a committee report? Hearing none, move on to liaison reports. And I do have a Port Authority report, which I will submit into the record. Okay, moving on to our ordinances and resolutions for this evening. As you heard from the law director, an update on 8820, which is on the table, which is, it's still in progress. Third reading, we have one in third reading. 0521.
An ordinance to amend section 943.07 of the Conneaut Codified Ordinances governing water department enforcement and not declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hockaday.
This is an update to the legislation that surrounds our backflow prevention program in our water distribution department. It's something that came up during our Ohio EPA water survey. It's something that needed to be updated. So we are doing that to come into compliance with our drinking water distribution permit. This is our third and hopefully our final reading. So I'm happy to answer any final questions from council regarding this legislation.
Hey, does council have any questions or concerns with this ordinance?
I don't think we received any public comment on this because we are in the third reading. So I'm assuming, correct?
I've not heard anything.
So I haven't heard anything either. I don't know if anybody else had or nothing.
Okay, Mr. Moenzio.
Do I need to waive the three reading or just make a motion to act on it? I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 05-21.
Here's a motion to act on ordinance 0521. Is there a second?
Rick Goss seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 0521 is passed. Move on to our first reading ordinances. Or second reading, we have none, so we will move on to our first reading ordinance. And we have 5 to consider for this evening. We'll begin with 0821.
An ordinance to authorize payment to the following contractor and the amount listed in section 1 below pursuant to section 5705.41D1 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
Well, from time to time, we come to council with this section because something was incurred without obtaining a purchase order prior to the liability. As you know, we can approve it up to $3,000. This is obviously $51,439.67, which we can't authorize with a then and now certificate, so it has to go before council. In speaking with Brian Bidwell, the wastewater director, he did have a purchase order for this in November of 2020. But it was closed. Why it was closed, I'm not sure. I don't know if he submitted it for closure or it was inadvertently closed, but now he has to encumber it out of the 2021 budget. So the only way to do that is for council to authorize this expenditure. It's obviously a legitimate expenditure. We do pay quite a bit to AgriSludge. I think it's close to $100,000 a year. So it's basically a formality at this point.
Okay. Any questions or comments regarding ordinance 0821? Now, is there a motion to proceed?
Mr. Arcaro, make a motion to declare ordinance 0821 an emergency.
It's a motion to declare ordinance 0821 emergency. Is there a second?
I'll second. Tammy Ledford.
Thank you, Mrs. Ledford.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Moiseo, the emergency has been declared.
I'll make a motion to suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 08-21.
It's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 0821. Is there a second?
I second.
Rick Goss second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Kozowski?
Yes.
Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo, the three reading rule has been suspended.
I would like to make a motion to act on ordinance 08-21.
Motion to act on 0821. Is there a second?
Rick Goss, second.
Thank you, Mr. Gah.
All right, Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 0821 is passed. Move on to ordinance 0921.
An ordinance to create Fund 260 COVID overtime grant for the purpose of accounting for the receipts and disbursements related to the coronavirus supplemental funding grant awarded to the City of Conneaut Police Department for COVID-related overtime.
Hey, Mr. Williams.
This is a grant that was applied for by Detective Cleveland. I believe we're going to receive $5,164 with this grant. Council, we've actually received a portion of the grant already. We just need to create the fund and have the revenue certified. Once it's certified, because it's a federal grant, it is deemed appropriated. So I will not have to come back to council to create the appropriation item because it is legally restricted. So this is, again, just a formality to create the fund for the grant.
Okay. Any questions or comments on ordinance 0921? Now, is there a motion to proceed?
Mr. Arcaro, I would like to waive the 3 reading rule on ordinance.
I'll make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 0921.
Okay, Mr. Emery caught that first, so thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Ledford, would you like to second that?
Yes. I'll second that.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Emery, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
Thank you. I would like to act on ordinance 09-21.
Motion to act on ordinance 0921. Is there a second?
Second.
Rick Goss, second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
The ordinance 0921 is passed. Move on to ordinance 1021.
An ordinance to close bank account number 24 Star Plus Stone Castle Cash Management LLC's federally insured cash account for the City of Conneaut.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you. This is effective May 31st, 2021. The Treasurer's Office will no longer endorse the Star Plus program. So back when interest rates were higher, the city used to have CD ladders. We would have CDs, a 1, 2, 3, up to a 5-year maturity. And each year one would mature, we'd add another 5-year CD. At that time, it was economically advantageous for us to do that. With the interest rates declining so much, we just put the majority of excess funds in Star Ohio. We, on average, have $4 to $5 million invested with Star Ohio. Then they came out with the Star Plus program because what it did is it reduced the liquidity. Star Ohio, you have immediate liquidity. So if you need to wire funds to another account, you can do it that day. With the Star Plus, they reduced the liquidity, but they gave you a higher interest rate. So we would move maybe some what would be operating funds into the Star Ohio account, and then those funds that we didn't need, we would put into the Star Plus. At that time, it had a substantially higher rate than Star Ohio. Now it's about the same, or sometimes Star Ohio actually has a higher rate than Star Plus. So They're no longer endorsing the program. They're saying there's other vehicles that you can use to do that. They will automatically transfer everything from Star Ohio to Star Plus, or from Star Plus to Star Ohio. I've already taken care of that. I've wired the money that was in Star Plus. We really didn't have much in there anymore because it wasn't advantageous for us to do it. So the majority of the money's in Star Ohio anyhow. So it was only about, I think, 19,000 left in Star Plus, but we do need council's approval to close this bank.
Okay, any questions? On ordinance 1021. If not, is there a motion to proceed?
Make a motion to waive the 3 reading rule on ordinance 10-21.
There's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 1021. Is there a second?
I'll second. Tammy Ledford.
Thank you, Mrs. Ledford.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Moiseo, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I would like to make a motion to act on ordinance 10-21.
Motion to act on ordinance 1021. Is there a second?
Rick Goss, second.
Thank you, Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
The ordinance 1021 is passed. Move on to ordinance 1121.
An ordinance to create Fund 327 Marks Radio Grant for the purpose of accounting for the receipts and disbursements related to the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of State Fire Marshal 2021 Marks Grant awarded to the Conneaut Fire Department.
Hey, Mr. Williams?
We received notice from the Department of Commerce that the city of Conneaut was awarded the Marks Radio Grant. It is for $48,844. This is a legally restricted proceeds from the Department of Commerce, so it will have to have a separate fund. Again, once these funds are certified, they're deemed appropriated, so I will not have to come back to council to create the line item.
Any questions or comments on ordinance 1121?
Mr. Williams, this is the grant for equipment, correct? The purchasing of equipment,
That is,
which would be radios,
Yes.
so on and so forth. But not to pay any type of user fees, correct?
that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it actually indicates in the grant itself, $0 is for the monthly subscription fees.
Okay. Programming, things like that.
Right.
Okay.
And council did create a software support line item last year in the budget for the fire department for some software support fees. I think it was $3,600 council approved.
Okay.
So if they had to, they could, use that line item to pay for
Right.
some of the fees.
Okay, any other questions or comments on ordinance 1121? Not, is there a motion to proceed?
This is Tammy Ledford. I'll make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 11-21.
Motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 1121. Is there a second?
Rick Goss, second.
Second by Mr. Moiseo.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
And Mrs. Ledford, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
This time I'd like to act on ordinance 11-21.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 1121. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
All right, Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski, Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 1121 has passed. Move on to ordinance 1221.
Fiscal Officer Certificate to the Council of the City of Conneaut, Ohio. As Fiscal Officer of the City of Conneaut, Ohio, I certify in connection with your proposed issue of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $498,000 for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of various street improvements, including resurfacing US 20 between Industry Road and approximately 800 feet east of Edgewood Avenue, and between Parish Road and approximately 200 feet east of Key Street, and pavement replacement on US 20 between approximately 800 feet east of Edgewood Avenue and Parish Road, including the rehabilitation of the Center Road Bridge over Conneaut Creek and the replacement of bridge number ATB 5312211 over Conneaut Creek, and related expenses that: one, the estimated life or period of usefulness of the improvement described above is at least 5 years. Two, the maximum maturity of the bonds are calculated in accordance with sections 133.20 is 15 years, being my estimate of the life or period of usefulness of that improvement. If and to the extent a portion of the proceeds of the bonds may be determined to be allocated to a class or classes having a maximum maturity of less than 15 years, but in excess of 5 years, then the maximum maturity of the bonds would still be at least 15 years by reason of a sufficient portion of the proceeds of the bonds allocated to a class or classes having a maximum maturity or an estimated period of usefulness in excess of 15 years. Dated February 22nd, John Williams, Director of Finance. An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $498,000 to pay a portion of the cost of various street improvements, including resurfacing of US 20 between Industry Road and approximately 800 feet of east of Edgewood Avenue, and between Parish Road and approximately 200 feet east of Key Street, and pavement replacement on US 20 between approximately 800 feet east of Edgewood Avenue and Parish Road, including the rehabilitation of the Center Road Bridge over Conneaut Creek and the replacement of the bridge number ATB 5312211 over Conneaut Creek and related expenses, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, definitely a mouthful. Mr.
I was gonna
Hockaday.
say, what else could you want to know?
That was a mouthful there, Pam.
So this
Set it off.
this is the public improvement project with ODOT, affectionately known as PID 98909. So with all the things that Pam just listed, so this represents our 10% share of the resurfacing cost on the mill and fill portion. The full depth repair was covered through two small cities grants totaling about $3.2 million, and an additional contribution by the state of Ohio of $800,000 for that. The city last year authorized debt to cover the design services and the design costs of that construction project. And this is the balance that was owed on the construction elements of the non-full depth repair sections. So we were able to attain a 10% maintenance credit. So this only represents 10% of the overall estimated cost of the projects. So for a total project cost a little bit shy of $5 million. So the maintenance credit that we received is based upon the city's prior expenditures in resurfacing, crack filling, and other related maintenance activities that the city conducts at its own expense. And therefore we were eligible for that. So if you want to look at it that way, the city saved about $498,000 by performing those activities on a regular basis and substantiating them to the state of Ohio. So that, in addition to the $4 million that we already received for the full depth repair, is a significant cost savings to the city that we'd otherwise be responsible for. So I appreciate John and the Public Works Department and so many others that helped secure these grants and other elements to get this project underway. Obviously, it's a massive project that will span 2 years, going out for bid on March 11th, and then beginning sometime in May and concluding at the end of 2022.
Okay, any questions or comments on ordinance 1221? Not entertain a motion to proceed.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Arcaro, to declare ordinance 1221 an emergency.
Okay, there's a motion to declare ordinance 1221 an emergency. Is there a second?
Tammy Ledford seconds.
Mrs. Ledford?
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Moiseo, the emergency has been declared.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 12-21.
The motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on ordinance 1221. Is there a second?
Rick Goss seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Moiseo, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 12-21.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 1221. Is there a second?
Tammy Ledford will second.
Thank you, Mrs. Ledford.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 1221 is passed. That concludes our ordinances for this evening. I'll move on to unfinished and old business. Hearing none, we'll move on to miscellaneous business.
I just have one thing, Mr. Arcaro. I want to thank Mr. Williams and the employees in the water billing department. I was made aware of there was a billing issue or a seasonal billing issue. Made them aware of it and they addressed it for a resident. So I want to thank them for doing that and looking into that. And I know the resident was very appreciative.
Okay. Anybody else for miscellaneous business?
Mr. Hockaday. Mr. Hockaday, would the 1st of March be a good time for that meeting?
This coming Monday?
Yes.
We do have a work session also scheduled that evening. If you wanted to do it after that,
That would, if Mr. Arcaro agrees with that, I don't see why not.
It's for the Parks meeting.
yeah, Parks and Rec.
Yeah, we should be able to squeeze that in afterwards.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Ledford?
yeah, I was just gonna reiterate, Mr. Hockaday had announced the planning commission meeting tomorrow at 6. So if any of you guys would like to attend, more than welcome.
Okay. So I would like to remind everybody, as Mr. Hockaday indicated in his report, about accessing the city's website. There's a number of resources on there. Definitely take advantage of it and definitely register for your COVID vaccine.
Mr. Arcaro,
Mr. Kozowski.
I have a few things. First, I want to extend my condolences and to the family of Ron Ross. He was a neighbor and good friend and previous fourth ward councilman, and he's going to be surely missed. Also, I'd like to extend condolences to the family of Richard Johnston. He was a longtime city employee. He was the superintendent of the water treatment plant a while back, and he retired from the city at that position. So I'd like to extend condolences to his family. Also, 2 weeks ago at this time, when we were meeting, there was the fire at the Anchor down there, Tony's Golden Anchor Restaurant. And I'd like to commend the fire department and police department. It was a treacherous night for them out there. And also to all the mutual aid companies that came here to assist in that fire. Also, I see that cleanup down there at the site is progressing quite well. And that's in comparison to some of the other areas in the city where we've had situations like that, where the property has sat in disrepair for many months until it was cleaned up, and some of them, the taxpayers had to clean those properties up. But I'm really pleased that the action the owner down there has taken on that property. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Anybody else for miscellaneous business? Okay, I did have one other thing. I'd just like to commend and extend our appreciation to the water department crews for all these line breaks that we've had. They're working in these frigid temperatures to get the service back on. So if you could pass that along to them. And finally, we need a motion to excuse Mrs. McVoy this evening, who's working overtime.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Tammy Ledford will second.
Thank you, Mr. Ledford.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. McVoy's been excused. Now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn if there's no further business.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mrs. Ledford.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Okay, City Council for February 22nd.